the status of persons with disabilities. I'm going to suspend with the rest of the items. I expect everybody to follow the health protocols that have been approved by the House of Commons, and would remind members that those that are appearing virtually, if you want to get my attention, to use the raised hand icon. Those members in the room, simply raise your hand. As you know, and as well, please speak clearly and slowly so that the translators will be able to interpret accurately for the benefit of the committee. And with that, at this time, I want to welcome Tara Collins, the 2018 award recipient, to begin our discussion with 5 minutes opening remarks followed by questions. And the question period, we will simply be following an informal process, not the normal questioning allocation. Any member of the committee that has a question for Ms. Collins following, simply raise their hand and I will recognize them in the order they raise so that everybody gets a chance to question Ms. Collins. So Ms. Collins, if you're ready, please begin with your opening statement, and thank you for being patient and waiting while committee members did the business of the House, which was to vote in the Commons. So Ms. Collins, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say thank you very much for the award as well. And so I'll start, normally I start with a territorial acknowledgement. However, I realize I have 5 minutes here. So I just want to say that I am on Treaty 7 region in Southern Alberta. And so I do want to recognize that in the name of truth and reconciliation. So I want to present in terms of my interests. So my interest really came from my own personal PTSD, as well as post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as seeing my children struggle with some mental health issues. There's some gaps in literature, there's limited services, and in particular for children. And one thing my daughter said that really came to me was, why are you and Dad able to go to an equine therapy program and I'm not able to? Because it really impacted her as well. And I still see that with her, and I see that with myself as well, in terms of still struggling at times with my own PTSD, some nightmares, easily startled as well. So this award means a lot to me. I do want to start as well by just saying that the range of PTSD there's a large range depending on whether or not somebody's in a war zone. So it can range about 8 to 20%. And really, the really important piece is that it impedes families' functioning as well. And so I looked at how do families cope when they live with a military parent experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. My findings, I looked at what's called Corbin and Strauss's grounded theory, which just looks at how do I engage with the literature, or how do I engage with the data. And I looked at, so I had 25 participants, 21 were non-military parents and 4 were adult children. And I conducted interviews that were semi-structured and in-depth. And so the findings, what happens with the grounded theory is we really look at developing a theory. So how can you explain and how can you predict coping? So the findings were family evolving. So that was my theory developed, which I ended up looking at the definition as the process involved in the modification, adjustment, or alteration of family behaviors in responses to changes in the family environment with the aim of overcoming and adapting to adversity posed by military PTSD. And so basically what that means is that we're looking at the stressors and available resources. So as the stressors become more predominant, the resources deplete, the more challenging it is for individuals to cope. And I just want to really quickly read one of the quotes that I have. Life changed after he was diagnosed with PTSD. He changed, our family changed, the way we did things changed, and we had to be careful not to upset him. So we walked on eggshells and tried to get not to get him going. And so that was a very common theme, is walking on eggshells and really trying to protect the family from, and not only the family, but protect the military member from being triggered as well. So based on this, I was able to determine their 6 states of functioning, which I won't go into the detail just in the name of time here, but one of them was stability and healthy functioning, which occurred prior to the military member having PTSD. So 11 of the participants knew the military member before PTSD, and that included all 4 of the adult children had known the military member before they developed PTSD. And so this state was stability and healthy functioning, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's that there aren't any stressors. However, this was when there was not as many stressors experienced without PTSD. And then instability and wavering functioning, that occurred when there was more stressors placed on the family and not as many resources that the family had. And so they ended up spiraling a bit more into an area where they weren't functioning as well. And so 5 of the families ended up going into the next state, which was crisis and emergency functioning. So what that looked like is really a crisis happening in the family. So risk to themselves, risk to others. So it could be suicide attempts, it could be police involvement, and it could include child welfare. And so some families, this in particular happened when the military system or Veterans Affairs was not providing enough support to them. So all of those families ended up, who did not have the support they needed, ended up going into a crisis, unfortunately. And then they went into rebalancing and rebuilding. Now, these families don't fit in this small little box, so it's important to recognize it's like an oscillating states of functioning. So they go through some phases, but they will not go through other states as well, and they bounce kind of all over the place, depending again on those resources. So the following rebalancing is reoccurring instability and deflated hope. So once again, they started feeling hopeless that things would change. And then finally, it's refocusing and evolving functioning. So at that point in time, is really when they evolve. The military member is likely seeking support. The children are receiving support, which unfortunately all 4 of the adult children did not receive any support. Their support often came from recreational activities, which can be problematic because about 25% of families identify they do not have the money for being able to attend those recreational activities. And so the implications are for military families in terms of recognizing that prevention is really needed, intervention as well, looking at families oscillating again through those states. So my theory was really able to capture the presenting concerns, the family dynamics, as well as coping, where most studies look at the states or the presenting concerns and the family dynamics without taking into consideration the holistic piece there. And so really recognizing as well that the case managers play a role, and unfortunately a lot of them did not find case managers as helpful. That being said, I do want to say that all of these families were extremely resilient. And so my recommendation would be to ensure that multiple strategies are taking place to help families adapt to the change. Families continually revise and refine strategies and structures. So again, it's often an ongoing kind of process to ensure that families are getting that support as well, and ensuring that there are proactive supports in place. So I will end there. I think that was about 5 minutes. That was very quick. I originally had about an hour presentation, so I cut it down as much as I could there. So thank you very much. And again, thank you very much for the award. So.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Collins. And yes, if you took that extensive report and cut it down, you did good. Some witnesses appearing before the committee could learn from you. So I'm sure committee members have extensive questions for you. The first person to indicate is Mr. Long. And as I indicated, we'll keep a balance on the timeline.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to my colleagues. And Ms. Collins, thank you for your work and thank you for your report. I was a part of the previous HUMA committee along with MP Shabbat that did award that award to you. And I guess my first question to you would be, I take your recommendations and I absolutely appreciate those, and I think they're good recommendations. Was there anything along the road of doing this report that you found that really surprised you that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I was surprised for a number of pieces. I was really surprised that none of the adult children were able to access supports, and I was quite surprised that the recreational piece was the main support. The other piece that I found surprising was looking at the Veterans Affairs website and trying to get a sense of the policies. There was definitely a lot of discrepancy between so it talked in terms of the description with the families being integral to the well-being of the military member, yet they had to really fight for any kind of support. So it kind of contradicted each other, but because it recognized that their well-being helps family member, helps the military members, yet at the same time, they really had to jump through hoops. And all of the families found that it was not an easy process, unfortunately. So.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Last question I have for you, Ms. Collins, is can you tell us, in your opinion, what we can do as a committee to make the Centennial Flame Award better? How can we improve it? How can we make it more responsive to people like you? Thank you.
To be honest, I actually, again, I really appreciate the award, and I was really grateful, and I think what I think you can, I don't know about do better, but I think that it was amazing that you recognize the invisible disability as well. And so I don't know that I necessarily have recommendations, except for to say that I think it was really critical. And it sounds like it may have been a unanimous decision. So I was really thrilled to know that the invisible disabilities are recognized. So again, I know that kind of skirts around the recommendations, but I do think that you did an excellent job. So,
Ms. Collins, thank you very much for the report. It's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madame Shabbat.
Mrs. Shabbat. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a delay there. Ms. Collins, congratulations and thank you for your contribution through this research. I have two questions. When we talk about strategy, it's sometimes difficult to put our finger on the right solution. But amongst these strategies, is there an approach that covers the family, the entire family, the nuclear family, or the immediate family? In the definition of family, sometimes family is broadened. Sometimes the wider family is more important than even the immediate family. Did you take that into consideration in your research?
Thank you. I think I understood that in French. I took French immersion, however, it's rusty. So with regards to the definition of family, I would say actually that is something that would be a limitation in my study, because I did have somebody ask whether or not it could be just partners or it had to be children that I interviewed. So with regards to that piece, I did not interview partners solely that did not have children, because of the fact that there have been literature and there has been studies done on families or on that family. Another challenge was different dynamic. So in terms of having two same-sex parents, that certainly, although I would definitely consider that as a family, I was not able to find anyone actually in my study that came forward that identified as a same-sex couple, as well as different cultures as well. And I know that some cultures identify extended family as well as family. And I would say Veterans Affairs, unfortunately, at this point in time, does not take into consideration some of the additional family members that are integral in families' lives. There are certainly, as I said, no supports for even the adult children, and the Veterans Affairs Crisis Line does not look at after the age of 21, allowing people to call in for support. So even that piece was problematic. In terms of supports, I think what I would recommend as well for families would be ensuring that they have more input into the care, recognizing that in terms of having the case manager be extremely transparent in terms of what services are out there, what they qualify for. A lot of these participants were really having to dig for what supports were out there, what they qualify, and as I said, really fight for those supports. And so for the website to identify that families are integral yet not provide a smooth transition is problematic. So did I answer all of that?
That's wonderful. I have one final question. We will have to, here in the committee, look at a strategy to make this prize more well known. How were you made aware of this Centennial Flame bursary?
Might need interpretation. Oops.
Can you hear me?
On the wrong channel, Ms. Collins. There is interpretation. Can you
is
go
there?
to the icon on the device you're using
Okay.
and look at the interpretation?
Okay, I apologize.
Madame Shabbat asked if you could, how you became aware of the particular Centennial Flame bursary and how the committee may advance better communications on that. So how you became aware of it, and do you have any advice to the committee on how we could better promote it? I believe I'm catching her correctly.
Actually, that's an excellent question. So I'm a good Googler. I went and tried to figure out what scholarships were out there. I'm not sure if it is on the university, different university websites, but I would recommend trying to implement it, and because there is a list of different scholarships that individuals may qualify for. So in the event that it is not, I would probably see about putting it in different universities as well to help people recognize that it is available. So I think that would be the predominant way to advertise as well.
Thank you. Ms. Collins, do you see a global icon on the bottom of your device? It may be, your interpretation may be turned off if you click and...
I think it is on now.
Okay.
It says English. So.
Yes, there you go, because Madame Shabbat may have additional questions, or Madame Ferretta, who will do it in French. Mr. Ruff.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ms. Collins, for coming and speaking to us today, and thanks for your support. My understanding, your ex-partner was military, and from personal experience, military people can't do their job without the support of their families, and I know it's so difficult when members are facing, and family members then end up dealing with post-traumatic stress and other types of challenges that come with supporting somebody in the military lifestyle. I'm kind of interested. I know you were doing this as part of your PhD, and you'd indicated on your application when you did it, you were in the process. Have you finished your PhD? Because I guess the angle, not just from the academic perspective, and you sharing it with us here at this committee, and through the award, but has your information, been shared with Veterans Affairs Canada already, and to other, the Canadian Armed Forces directly, the Military Family Resources Centers? Just sort of wondering where the information's gone and what kind of feedback you've received to date. And I have a subsequent follow-up. Thanks.
So I graduated January 2020. No, 2022. Sorry, I just graduated. I can't remember the year here. And so I just graduated. I'm in the process of doing a few different pieces right now. I actually wrote a paper on my own experience that is going to be published. I'm looking at doing some different publications as well. My goal is to approach also those three bodies as well as potentially some legions as well. And so at this point in time, I have not reached out. However, that is my plan. I also applied for a presentation with the Canadian Institute of Military Veterans Health Research, as well as one in the States, actually, as well in Phoenix, so on children's well-being. So that's my plan in the future.
Well, so super, and congratulations on finishing a PhD. That's a phenomenal accomplishment that not a lot of people do. And yeah, looking forward, anything that the committee can help, anything I can help personally, feel free to reach out directly to put you in contact with some of the different organizations through the contacts. My final comment is more for the whole committee and everybody listening, but as well for you, Ms. Collins, is I don't know if you're aware, there's the Sam Sharp Breakfast on next Tuesday morning at 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 here in Ottawa. There should be it's supposed to be virtual. We're having some technical difficulties, but that's hosted. It's the 9th annual by the Honourable Aaron O'Toole and Lieutenant General Retired Honourable Romeo Dallaire. And it's all about mental health. And the guest speaker is retired Lieutenant Colonel Christian Lillington that's speaking this time around. And he's retired, just published his own book as well, but from a family perspective, and it's some great research. But there'll be a number of organizations participating in that you'd likely benefit from attending. Again, feel free to reach out if I will pull whatever strings I need to make sure you get a personal invite.
Thank you. Yes, I would definitely be interested, and I would be interested for sure in terms of you connecting me with anyone, because as you know, I'm very passionate about this, and I definitely think that families need more recognition. So please do.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Ref, and I'm sure you'll follow up with Ms. Collins on that particular point. Madame Martinez-Ferreira.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. I wasn't part of the committee when you received this bursary, but I can imagine you've done a lot of work. And someone from my family has just graduated with the PhD, and I know just what a long path that is, a lot of work. So congratulations on your achievement. Very few people are able to do this. I'd like to ask you a question in line with your study. I'm interested particularly in your comments. Right now, we're witnessing a war in Europe that will have an impact on a lot of families that are going to be coming here. So I know that the study you did looked at military service and the impact on the family, and where you were looking at people who served in the army. But how about the families that we're going to be welcoming, these Ukrainians? How do you think that your study will help us understand the situation of the families that are going to come here and who have lived through their experience in Europe?
Thank you for the question. I think this study has a huge impact in terms of recognizing that coping is not a linear process, that there is a number of different factors that put our impact families, that impact how it depends on their presenting concerns. So what do they come with at that time? But recognizing that there is those shift in family dynamics. And I don't only want to say that for families that are coming in, but this could apply also to families that are civilians. However, obviously there's more complex dynamics. And so I do want to acknowledge that I think it's really important to look at multiple levels. So it's not just looking at the micro level and looking at families, but it's also looking at the external kind of bodies in terms of what are the policies, what's the culture. So it might be looking at the Canadian culture and how does that influence the families. And so actually, interestingly enough, I know in terms of some of the research suggests that immigrants who come over experience a higher level of mental health issues. And so I think that that's important as well. So recognizing that there's just multiple levels that take place and making sure that we implement supports prior to even them developing any mental health issues, I think would be very important. So recommending, I mean, obviously you can't force people to access supports, but I think implementing as many supports as you can and recognizing as well that people are essentially having to, if you look at relocation, even with Canadian military members, looking at relocation, there's a number of different losses in terms of looking at lack of support systems, having to, look at different employment, looking at medical care. So all of those pieces need to be considered. Obviously it's hard to find a doctor oftentimes. So how do you connect these people with all these different resources so that they're not experiencing additional stress? So I think it has a lot of relevancy there as well.
Good. Just before Ms. Collins and Madame Martinez-Ferreira, I need unanimous consent to continue. There, as you see, there is 30-minute bells, so I'll take direction from the committee. Do we have unanimous consent? Okay. Thank you. We'll continue. Madame, did you conclude?
I have a very quick question with respect to the bursary that you received and the cost involved in doing this study. Was the amount significant? Did it help with your study? I just wanted to get an idea of whether this amount was appropriate.
So doing a PhD is very expensive. I did actually also receive an award from Wounded Warriors, so that one was quite extensive. And so, I mean, every little bit helps for sure. I would say that I didn't have to tap into any savings, though, so I do appreciate, as I said, any amount. Obviously, the more, the better for people, but I think that $5,000 really supported a lot of my own traveling to visit families as well, and to sit down with families in terms of time as well. It saved me resources for sure. So,
yeah. Thank you, Madame Martinez-Ferreira. Do we have any other? I have a question, actually, if I could take liberty as chair to pose a question. Okay, thank you. Ms. Collins, it was interesting. In your opening comments, you made reference to part of your, if I got this correct, of your study was on how to predict coping. Do I have that correctly? Yes.
So a theory is about predicting and explaining something. So yes, it is.
So could you expand on that? How I'm curious on the side because to predict coping, I mean, everybody copes differently. every situation puts different context. So I'd be curious on your understanding and what your research led you to conclude.
So as I said, nobody fits in this very tight box. It's a constantly shifting piece. It's constantly evolving. And so what I did find, though, is out of all of the participants, this was kind of what the process looked like for them. So going through these different states, and I wish I could show you the diagram, but it's really how do I describe this? Going kind of all over the place. So if you think of little swirls all over the place between the different states. So it's not a matter of being stuck in one of those states. And really, so I broke it down into presenting concerns, family dynamics, and coping in each of those states. And so that was the most talked about during the different states. So it's not that it necessarily 100% happens. However, that's what I found most predominantly. And so normally with qualitative research, and in particular with developing a theory, you test it afterwards, so through quantitative or through numbers. And so currently this is the voices, and what the voices are telling me is that this is predominantly what happens in each of these kind of states that families go through.
Was there a common thread that you
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and so the common thread would be going through each of those different states. And so the common thread was military families who knew them prior to the PTSD developed, had more resources. They had that ability to go back and really go back to their friendship before, to go back to being able to reassure them that they're more than the PTSD. So all of the states had themes that came up that were quite regular in each of them. For the crisis state, as I said, every single one of those families found that the barriers to and the policies associated with having to or trying to get supports were way too much for them. And all of those families went into that I had mentioned went into that crisis that was very severe, to the point that there was, for example, one family in which the gentleman had a couple kids that were having to call their mom saying that their dad wanted to kill himself because he was so didn't have those resources again and didn't have those coping tools. So I would say that there is a theme that happened in each of those kind of categories that are the states that I had mentioned, but of course nobody fits in this tightly knit box. So
Mr. Van Byn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is really good information. The presentation is great. And it leads me to the next step with this in terms of how are we going to advertise the program. And I see that some of the communications tools involve a web page, and I'm wondering if this interview and this discussion and this presentation could form part of that web page, and so that people who are interested in the grant can see exactly what's come out of that. And it might be a good place for us to, as we distribute knowledge of it, for people to be able to reach in, take a look at the presentation, get the benefit of this interview, and I think that that would be very helpful. So it's not that we shelter or we keep what was learned under a basket. How do we get that out?
Well, and please do put this on your website or anywhere. And like in terms of me personally, I've had a number of families reach out to me actually after and say this is really beneficial, knowing that this secondary trauma or this trauma happens to families and that families are impacted. So feel free to also send them my phone number and email. I get messages all the time, actually a fair bit from different people. And as I said, as mentioned earlier, being able to connect me to different sources, I think that's fantastic, and I'm certainly willing to get that information out as well. So hopefully, I really do strongly believe that this information and the study can help people to recognize what might be needed to get to those healthier states of functioning. And so, by all means, please advertise and please connect me with different people and. Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could we ask staff, when they're going through the communications side of this program, to give some consideration to doing something like that so that we can get the maximum benefit out of what was learned?
Well, certainly Ms. Collins has made the offer, and we'll ensure that is taken into consideration.
Thank you so much.
On behalf of the committee, Ms. Collins, thank you for reaching out to apply and participating in the study. The study you did is certainly very current in the world we live in. The challenges and demands on individuals and families continue to grow. And again, thank you for coming in and explaining your study and what the Centennial Flame Award meant to you. So on behalf,
and it did mean a lot to me. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm sure we will be. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fascinating field you were dwelling into, Ms. Collins. And again, on behalf of the committee members, thank you for participating, and thank you for taking your time to be here with committee members today to answer their questions.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much again for the award. So, okay, take care, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
With that, committee members, we will. How's our timeline doing? If we're okay, we may take some time for committee business, and if it's okay with the committee, we'll remain in public so we don't have to zoom in and out. So those members that are on virtually, just stay with the link you're in, and if that's agreeable to the committee, we will stay in public. So let's on this particular part, a couple of items from committee business we'd like to deal with. Is one of the first is what's your direction on setting the award for the coming year, for the coming award, right? Was that part of we had to establish? The deadline for submitting an application, correct? Yes.
Ideally September.
Yep. Recognizing that usually this was circulated when earlier in the year. Yes. Clerk, speak to.
I'm just going to add a quick insert about this. So normally we give applicants about 5 weeks from the date we actually publicize it to submit an application. Just looking at the time frame and understanding that many of the applicants, like Tara Collins, are often in education in school and post-secondary education, and looking at the time year from September to April, ideally we like to circulate this and give this enough time to get everyone involved. So maybe a deadline of September might be agreeable. This way we capture people who come back to school in September and they can submit an application. So maybe sometime end of September if the members are agreeable, and this way they can take a look at it when they come back, translate everything, and circulate to the members, if that would be agreeable.
What's your direction?
Yeah, that's a good recommendation.
Okay, so we have that. So we set the amount of 6,700. We set the deadline. And one part you have circulated was, recall at one time we were considering doing a video in front of the Centennial Flame. The advice was we cannot do that. So you have within your package a recommendation on promoting how we promote the ward.
I think, Chair, I'll just jump in. I think even as MPs, we can promote this through our own social media networks. Just not a one-off. Like, I think we can really spread that web, if you will, if we really promote it ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
I'm just going to quickly. Oh, what's going on?
No, I was just wondering why, what was the recommendation? What was the logic behind not doing the video?
One of the challenges is the video is the timing of the video to make sure the video comes out quickly enough. It's also the matter of we usually do low-cost options to make sure the funding for the award goes to the applicants themselves and not to video. It's also a matter of accessibility. The accessibility of the video to make sure that people who have hearing impairment or visual impairments is also reflected in the video and might be quite consuming to do a video. When we talked with communications, lots of the options in terms of having, as Mr. Van Bynen said, having the applicant's documents get posted on the website could be an option to better publicize it. Mass emails, we're looking more at a strategy for emailing individuals, creating lists for universities, cultural groups, visual minority groups, to make sure that we get them to the groups themselves and then have a staggered approach. Quite often in the past, we just did one email. We're looking more at a staggered approach. So the moment the news release comes out, we can do multiple emails throughout the month of May and June and do a second bombardment of communications in September when people come back. And then on top of that, we can also do news release and infographics. And infographics will allow having text-based materials. And then we can also share it with the members to put in your constituent emails and mailouts. So we're looking more at a more print-based that would probably be more accessible than video. And it's also a matter of maybe not everyone would be comfortable appearing in a video and forever being on the website too. So we're really looking more at text-based approaches, visual approaches, and that's where we're leaning for communications.
Last time didn't even have it in their householders. Like, I think that we can get it out there a lot more effectively too, myself included.
So, yeah, so just to build on that, so really the issue is from doing the video as a House of Commons sponsored sort of paid for thing. That's the issue. I get all that for the hoops we got to jump through, but there's nothing stopping us as MPs that we could all literally walk over there ourselves and shoot our own video if we wanted, just based on our own resources. Gotcha.
Together.
That's it. That answered my question.
Madame Chabot?
I think that's a good communication strategy. But where I do agree with you is it's the amount going for the bursary. It should go to the applicant and not to promote the bursary. We want to avoid costly communication strategies. I think that at the outset, well, I think that the university sites would be good. I think that we should also include, well, in my writing, I don't know if it's the same for other MPs, but there's disabled people's groups. They should be covered. So we have to come up with some way to attract them.
Madame Chabot, before we go for that, I just want to get some clearance from the committee. Is everybody staying here, or does anybody need the time to return to the chamber to vote in person? You do, Madame? Yes, okay. Because if everybody is staying here, then we can vote virtually. We can vote virtually. The two members on virtually will do. So if we do, okay. So we have agreement then to stay, and members will vote we'll suspend for a few minutes whenever members need to vote.
Pour 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Madame Chabot?
Can we suspend for 5 minutes? Now? No. When it's time. Yes.
And then we can move, but some members have to leave, so we will be adjourning. We will be adjourning around 5:40. So we have Madame Zerillo. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a motion that I'd like to move to the table. I'm not sure if we'll have time for discussion today. I sent a notice of motion a couple of weeks back, so just let me know when is a good time for me to move that to the table.
Well, we're in committee business.
Okay,
Madame
so you're
Zarrillo,
okay for me to
and
do
it has the necessary timeline. It's been 48. Yeah. So, Madame Zarrillo, if you want to, you have the floor if you want to introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I circulated a few weeks ago, on March 31st, actually, a notice of motion to ask that the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities call upon the government to codify all the people who receive provincial support for their disability as people with disabilities in order to facilitate the ease of a payment of future benefit for disabled persons, and that the government table a comprehensive response thereto. And Mr. Chair, this is related to some of the testimony that we've heard from the ministry that at this point in time there is not an easy way to identify those persons that receive provincial disabilities in any kind of federal database. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Zarrillo. Before we go, there is an agreement amongst party whips that we suspend 10 minutes before the vote. So I will suspend now until the vote's concluded, and then we will resume. The committee meeting, and Madame Zerillo, you had the floor, and you were introducing your motion.
I did, Mr. Chair, and I don't have any other comments at this time.
Okay. Madame Chabot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions rather than comments on the substance of the motion. I do understand the intent behind it with respect to this new disability benefit, but I'm wondering whether it would be possible to codify all individuals who receive provincial support. I'll give the example from Quebec. I don't know how it works in the rest of Canada, but in Quebec, there are benefits for disabled individuals, both adult and children, independent of what's happening with the federal government. So how can the federal government get information about these individuals? I think that this info would come from Revenue Quebec. I'm trying to understand how this would work. Is it feasible? If the officials aren't able to do it, I would imagine it's because there's something that prevents them from getting the info, or because of the variations from one province to the next. So I have no questions about the substance. I'm just wondering whether this would be feasible.
Next, Madame Martinez-Ferreira. You had your hand up, and then we'll go to Mr. Zerillo.
I'm going to wait for Ms. Zerillo to answer the question before I ask my question.
A really good question from Madame Chabot. I mean, that's one of the things that the government's going to need to figure out is how they identify it. I don't know the workings behind the scenes of CRA or how information is transferred, but I do know that there's an opportunity for us to understand who gets a provincial benefit that could potentially be recorded for federally. But I would leave that to the bureaucrats to figure that out.
Madame Martinez-Ferreira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do support my colleague's motion. I think it would be very beneficial to know who receives support, both provincially and federally, but to answer Ms. Chabot's question, perhaps instead of asking the government to codify, we could ask the government about the opportunity or the possibility of codifying. Because we have to come up with some way of making this feasible. It would provide, this change would provide some flexibility to the motion. I have the wording in English.
Order 101, committee requests that government tables a comprehensive response. Alors, à ce moment-là, juste rajouter de...
So I would just add that.
Rapport à la Chambre, Louise.
The report to the House 109. So we would be adding.
Before we get to Madame Chabot, you had your hand up.
I had noted. I had come up with an amendment to add if it's possible. So if something's impossible, we can't do anything. But otherwise, I'd be in agreement with this amendment.
Okay, for clarification then, Madame Martinez-Ferreira, you made an amendment to the motion?
Yes. That add the word if possible, or talk about the possibility to ask the government whether it would be possible to codify, etc. Is that okay? And to add the amendment to the further to the report to the House 109, Standing Order 109.
9 after we deal with
Well,
the
it's
amendment.
it's a whole amendment. I can present that as in one amendment?
No.
Why not? It's one amendment and then the other? But I just presented an amendment.
Oh, most definitely, the amendment is, the committee would like to do it that way. Normally when we do a report, we usually have the 109, the Standing Order 109 at the end, following.
Tu veux qu'on fasse un puis après là? I don't mind. Whoever, if the committee wants to do like that.
Clarification then, so committee members, are you clear? We're voting first on the amendment put forward by Madame Martinez Ferrata. Madame Kuzi?
I'm sorry, just to clarify, were there two parts to the amendment or just the one? My understanding was just the one part is the possibility.
Yes, but my understanding is that I have to present them separately.
Okay, so
That's my understanding.
Your first amendment is adding the words the possibility. Okay, so we're voting on that one
That's what I'm
amendment.
getting,
Okay,
yes.
all right, thank you.
Okay, everybody, you've heard the
Okay.
amendment by Madame.
Is the amendment friendly to Ms. Zarillo? Okay, thank you.
Yes, she accepted, yes. Sorry, yes, Madame Zarillo had agreed to that. So, Madame Ferratus, you have the amendment is by adding the word possibly. Possibly.
Gouvernement demande au gouvernement
Ask the government whether it would be possible to codify.
With the amendment, signify by putting your hand. So I see a consensus. Did you have your hand up for a question, Madame Shabat? No? No. Okay, now for the amendment, for the motion as amended. All those in agreement? Signify
No,
hands.
I have an amendment, Mr. Chair. The second amendment is
Okay.
pursuant Standing Order 101.
Sorry, before we get to it, we have a second amendment on the floor from Madame Ferrata, which is adding, clerk, give the proper terminology. It's adding the report. Ferrata, you want to that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests that the government table a comprehensive response to this report. This is your amendment, Madame Ferrata. All those in agreement? Signify by aye. Okay. So we have agreement on the amendment. Now, the second amendment. Now we'll vote on the motion as amended. All those in agreement with the motion of Madame Zarillo as amended? We have unanimous consent. Okay, thank you. The motion is carried. In the few minutes we have left, there's one item. On April the 27th, a study budget in the amount of $26,750 was circulated for consideration and adoption. We need approval of the budget for the Housing Accelerator study. Do we have agreement or approval? Yes. Good. The budget is approved. Number two. Madame Shabat?
Me too.
Encore.
Yes, I still have a question. I'll ask a question about the budget, but correct me if I'm wrong. But as we know, we can invite people individually, witnesses to come in person. So if ever we were to invite witnesses to come here in person, would this budget and subsequent budgets be adequate? That's the question I have for you.
I'll ask the clerk to address that, Madame Shabat.
Yes, it's adequate. What we've proposed would give the amounts for people virtually and in person.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Van Byn.
Question before we went into this motion, and I didn't want to interrupt the process with the motion, but it relates back to advertising and the communications piece for the award that we just heard today. So if you want to finish the rest of the business, I would just like to speak to that. Like I said, I didn't want to interrupt because the motion was introduced.
Okay, so that's fine. The budget was carried. On April, a news release was circulated for consideration and adoption. You have the news release. Do we have approval of the news release for the housing study that's coming up? Okay, if I see no objections, then the news release is finished. The third item is, okay, we need...
Mr. Chairman, I believe we're over time, and I would like to move adjournment of the meeting.
Yes, Mr. Leipert, a motion for adjournment is always in order. It's been seconded, so thank you, Mr. Leipert. The meeting is adjourned.